If we're involved in literacy education, I believe that we have a responsibility to demonstrate the ways in which literacy and numeracy are meaningful in our lives. I believe the most important demonstrations that we give are the demonstrations that we give about who we are. You teach who you are. And for me, literacy is a way of making sense of the world. It's a way of sharing it, it's a way of shaping it, it's a way of building upon it, it's a way of improving it. But reading the world can be difficult and painful at times. It's difficult and painful to make sense of things like that. How do we make sense of the ground shaking and turning to soup? How do we make sense of massive cathedrals falling down and hundreds of people being killed? Some of our team were here that day. I'm sure there were others of you that were there that day in Christchurch. And when I talked to Damon about it, you know what he said? He said, "Peter, it did my head in." Isn't that interesting? It did my head in. Because it's hard to make sense of these things. Okay, so death and grieving, earthquakes, they're difficult things to make sense of. We can make up explanations. Some may say, and forgive me if I get this pronunciation wrong, but I think it's Ruamoko. Is that Cheryl? Some may say that Ruamoko that's the explanation that the gods are angry with us. For others, that's not going to be a satisfactory explanation. Some may say that it's about tectonic plates and continental drift. And for others, that's not going to be a satisfactory explanation. But these are really difficult things, aren't they? I mean, let's face it, earthquakes, death, grieving, all that heavy stuff, that is really hard. It's really hard to make sense of that. Surely we can make sense of something easier, like the education and training institutions that we work within. That'd be your irony, wouldn't it? Let me share with you another poem written by an adult literacy practitioner about being an adult literacy practitioner. It's called Dear Director. Forgive me if you've heard this before. There may be one or two people in the room that have heard this before. Regarding employment opportunities, dear Director, might you have a vacancy for a reflective practitioner? I'm learning to navigate Sean's swamp, to recognise corporate crocodiles and avoid administrative quicksand. I'm becoming a critical thinker, awakened to the discourses of power and privilege. I've mastered my TLA, I should have done this on the board. You must know what a TLA is. TLA, like TEC, ITO, RPL, PTE. I've mastered my TLAs and the rest. I'm writing to managing change. I'll be clever and creative if I can. I'm willing to give retraining and multi-skilling a go. It seems there are two categories under which I might apply, casual and contract. I've only got two questions. If you said I could be a casual employee and I came in casual, wearing shorts, jandals and t-shirt, stashed my cool box under the desk and put my feet up and said, "Okay dudes, what's on today?" you'd say I wasn't professional. And show me how casual is easily made into casualty. Yet, when I rush between jobs, hot and flustered in city traffic jams, when my mind is fractured into half a dozen different desks in different places with different faces, and what I want is always in the last one, when I'm forced to make a hostage of my professionalism and cram it into a cardboard box in the boot of my car, when my spouse spits the dummy at the endless unpaid hours of preparation and development, and I'm torn because I respect my students and I want to do it for them. When I experience all of this, it doesn't seem very bloody casual to me. So I asked, for whom is casual employment casual? But perhaps you say I can go on contract. If so, I can offer you professional commitment and competence, integrity and loyalty, dedication to the work. Yet it seems your contract leaves little room for strategic planning. With staff security shrunk to single semesters, curriculum development is reduced to punching out packages for flexible delivery by the unknown trainers who win the tender. And professional development doesn't rate a mention in your contract, though I'm sure you'll support me with smiles and words of encouragement. I notice your contract falls just short of my vacation. But worse, far worse, it falls well short of my vocation. I'm ready to work, prepared to be challenged and stretched and expanded to meet new horizons and to continue developing. And so my second question would be, why would you want to contract my profession and my professionalism? It may be of interest for you to know that this poem was written in 1994. And that's surprising to me because it seems a long time ago. And it was written by a young adult education practitioner, a young adult literacy practitioner 17 years ago, exactly 17 years younger than I am now. And what's surprising still is that I'm sure that adult literacy practitioner would be surprised to know that in time the director was the one in the mirror. That when he looked in the mirror, that young practitioner would see the director to whom he was addressing his poem. So there's irony here, eh? 20 years later, I'm still wrestling with the same problems. 20 years later, still wrestling with the same constraints. The constraints of funding, the constraints of contracts, the constraints of position descriptions, the political constraints. 20 years later, I'm still in the same match. And sometimes it feels like we are taking one step forward and two steps back, but I don't believe we are. I can recall in the late 1970s, I became involved in a small group of people in Melbourne, in Victoria, and we convened a meeting to bring together all of the paid adult literacy workers in Victoria to form an association. And we came together and we met in the office of one of my colleagues, and there were 6 of us. And we had some cheese and a bottle of red, and got underway with the establishment of the Victorian Adult Literacy Council, which later became the Victorian Adult Literacy and Basic Education Council. And a couple of years ago, the Victorian Adult Literacy and Basic Education Council invited me to come and do the keynote address for the annual conference for the Victorian Adult Literacy and Basic Education Council. And there were over 200 people to speak to at that address. So when I see things like that happen, I think, yeah, maybe we're making some progress. And those 200 people reflected dozens of different providers and thousands of different adult learners engaged in the system. So there has been development. There's been sufficient development for New Zealand to be able to attract an eminent professor from the other side of the world to come and be a co-director of the National Centre for Adult Literacy and Numeracy here at the University of Waikato. And there's been sufficient development for us to have this dedicated and committed group of people here this afternoon and the people that we've had here the last 2 days. So development is definitely taking place. I wanted to say just a few words about the National Centre. I'm not going to bang on about this too long, but I wanted to mention the role of the National Centre because I want to make it very clear and explicit that we are not interested in contracting the profession and contracting the professionalism. On the contrary, what we're trying to do at the National Centre is to build capacity and build capability and enhance the professionalism of people working in this sector. And when I use a word like profession and professionalism, I'm mindful also of the work of volunteers working in this area, because I believe that volunteers can be thoroughly professional in the work that they do, and the very best of them are. But they need support to be able to do that. They need infrastructure, they need training, they need research to back them up, they need other people to work with. So we're in the business of trying to do that. That's our vision statement. Some of you will have seen this before. There's 6 strategic goals that the Centre is working towards. Those goals are concerned with those sorts of things. The 4 goals at the top there are really concerned with practice. And then we've got a focus on policy and research. So it's that dynamic interaction between research and policy and practice that we're constantly trying to evolve and to grow and to develop. And the way that we go about doing that is really important. And it seems to me that what we would like to be able to do at the National Centre, and this slide is the last part of the advertorial, is that we want to reflect a certain set of values. I believe that the National Centre will be of value to the field going forward, will be of value to the sector going forward, will be of value to the government, will be of value to the people of New Zealand. But it will only be of value if we can reflect a certain set of values. And I think their value is something like this. The National Centre needs to be of service to you, to your providers, to your communities. We need to be able to inform and educate. We need to be able to add value. We need to promote critical literacies and numeracies. We need to develop and demonstrate inclusive models, bicultural models or multicultural models of practice. We need to be able to identify and encourage and facilitate synergies and connections. I think that's one of the fantastic things about what's happened yesterday and today. The connections that are coming together between people in different organisations, between research and practice, between practitioners, between policy and practitioners. I think we need to be owned and valued by the sector, and it's only if we are owned and valued by the sector that the National Centre will ultimately have a long-term future. We need to promote evidence-based policy and practice. I don't think we should be scared or intimidated about evidence-based policy and practice, but we do need to get better at it in a whole range of different ways. We need to practice and promote critical reflection and program evaluation. We need to provide informed leadership. These sorts of things. But all of that is not simple, eh? All of that's a lot easier said than done.